And I remember him saying, if you're going to live in fear, you're not going to live. So if you're operating from the frequency of pure love, not this cheesy love stuff, but pure divine love, that's the beacon that shines and guides people and allows you to live a peaceful, happy life and sets the bar for other people to want to live that same type of way. Where fear is, happiness is not. Welcome to the Energy Within podcast, helping you to embrace your weird, beat imposter syndrome, and take action on your soul's purpose. My name is Carrie Jokala. I am your host. I am a Reiki master teacher, a fitness instructor, a wife, a mom to 2 little boys, and this is episode 197. And despite doing an episode last week about how to be weird, how to be yourself, and talking about how I keep getting messages to play more, maybe you'll start being a little more, not lighthearted, I feel like I'm often lighthearted, but just not take things so seriously. Despite that, here we are with a rather serious episode. Just because it felt, in trying to come up with a topic for this week, it felt right. It landed, it felt in alignment. And truthfully, it's one that I've wanted to do an episode on for a long time and kept talking myself out of, oddly enough, because I was afraid. I don't even really know where to begin. I have a few quotes from a couple different books that I want to share that I thought were really interesting, talking about the topic of fear today. And the first time I ever thought about doing an episode about not letting fear overtake your life, it was because I finally truly understood a quote from one of my religion teachers, one of my theology teachers in high school. He was my favorite. He was hilarious. He was always making jokes. He was so nice. And I can't remember the exact context of the quote, but the quote itself always stuck with me. In fact, I think I wrote it down because when I was in high school and I still thought that my only career path was going to be being a creative writer, I would jot down little notes here and there, ideas that would pop into my head throughout all of my notebooks. I may have had a dedicated notebook here and there, but if I didn't have that available, I would write it wherever I could. And I also started writing down random quotes that either struck me because they resonated with me, or just because it was something funny that someone said and I wanted to remember it. This one was rather serious. And like I said, I can't remember the context that it came up in. But I was in high school, so this is the late 90s. It was a long time ago. And I remember him saying, if you're going to live in fear, you're not going to live. And it made sense to me, but I didn't truly understand it. Because being a teenager, being relatively naive at that point in my life, I didn't really know what there could possibly be to be that afraid of. And then the pandemic hit. And I don't know exactly what made that quote pop back into my head at that point in time. I would randomly think about it, I'm sure, at random points in my life, although nothing specific stands out, because we all have random memories pop up at random times, although I don't believe it's all random, but that's a whole different story. And trust me, this episode is not about the pandemic in any way, shape, or form. But it does factor in a little bit in the fact that on some level, I do believe it's responsible for increasing significantly the level of fear that a lot of people have been living in since it started. It changed a whole lot of things for all of us. It changed people's career paths. It changed the way people look at their own lives. It changed the way people look at the world. It changed the way people interact with each other, in some ways good, in some ways bad. And what's interesting is one of the books, the one that I got the most amount of quotes from that I want to share, and hopefully I can find a way to share them in a logical way that makes sense in this conversation. But it's called The Fear Project, and I'm going to say the author's name wrong. Jamal Yogis. I'll spell it. I'll put it in the show notes along with the other book that I'm going to mention. I didn't look to see exactly when this book was published, but I know I read it probably just under 10 years ago, a little less. So it's been out for a while, and I was reviewing part of it because I wanted to look up and reference some things to really show like what fear does to the body, rather than this just being an episode of me riffing and telling you my own thoughts. And what was interesting, at whatever point this book was written or published, at least, there's a paragraph that says, "The world is more peaceful right now than at any time in the last century." I don't mean to chuckle, but if you can't laugh, what are you going to do? Obviously, that's changed a lot quickly in just the last few years. Like I always say, I don't care what side of anything you're on. I think we should all be able to agree on the fact that the last 3 years have turned everything upside down. What's interesting, though, is right after that, it says, "But if you look at the statistics on anxiety disorders, watch the news, or check in with your stress thermostat on any given day, it seems that we're more scared than ever." So this is just me theorizing that as things like anxiety, as things like just living with a high baseline of stress and all of us kind of normalizing that and thinking that that's just how we're supposed to live and just deal with it and figure out your coping mechanisms, I'm sure that that primed us for everything to snowball so quickly in the last few years. So here's another interesting thing to note, is that a while ago, I spent some time talking about people using guilt and shame as a way to get other people to say, do, think, act the way that they think these other people should, and how that's really not effective. The best thing that we can do, I'll keep saying because this is, you got to play the long game, is to learn how to be yourself. It's learning to embrace your weird. It's learning to embrace who you really are, how to shine your light, how to fully be yourself, live your best possible life, exist as an example, exist as a light with intention, but without ego, in the sense that you're intentionally trying to act like you're better than other people and that they should be following in your footsteps just because you're so amazing. It's the real confidence, the true confidence, where you're just being yourself and therefore people are drawn to you and then make their own decisions, their own choices, their own changes to become comfortable being themselves, because you are setting that example and creating that atmosphere where they feel safe enough and comfortable enough to be themselves. And then it becomes a ripple effect from there. But the whole point of that being that guilt and shame on this frequency scale operates at, here it says shame is at 20 hertz and guilt is at 30 hertz. That's pretty dang low. I forget the exact range, but I heard something a few times about how the average person operates, I want to say, between like 50 to 70 hertz or something in around that range. And that's right where that's apathy, that's grief, and at 100 hertz is fear. So fear is still pretty low on the frequency scale. If we look instead at love, that's at 500. Joy is at 540. Peace is at 600. Enlightenment is at 700 plus. So if you're operating from the frequency of pure love, not this cheesy love stuff, but pure divine love, that's the beacon that shines and guides people and allows you to live a peaceful, happy life and sets the bar for other people to want to live that same type of way, to fully be themselves, to fully shine their light. So now, rather than specifically talking about guilt and shame, we're talking about fear. And if we're operating around that frequency more often than not, even if we're not presently in a state of fear, then no wonder we're feeling like we're not making any progress, both individually and collectively. No wonder it's so easy for us to continue to feel divided, to add to the division. Like, no matter what my own personal thoughts, it really is my goal to do my best to not intentionally add to any division. I don't mean to sound all kumbaya, can't we all just get along? But I really do believe that it is possible for us to all figure out how to exist, to get along, even while maintaining different beliefs. But if we're living in these low frequencies, it makes it so much harder. The frequency of fear, the frequency of guilt and shame are so far down on the frequency spectrum. Doesn't automatically make them bad or negative, but they're not helping as much as operating in those higher frequencies. And in case you haven't been here before, I do not advocate for pretending that you don't feel a certain emotion, for trying to claw your way out of it without dealing with it, processing through it. We need to allow ourselves to be human. We have to process through things in order to come out stronger on the other side. But we still don't want to live our entire life, or even most of our life, in that frequency. So in this book, The Fear Project, he quotes a few other people. So I'm just going to read these ones straight out of the book here. So the Roman philosopher Seneca says, "Where fear is, happiness is not." Well, that makes sense, because joy, which we could equate with happiness, is up at 540 hertz. Fear is down at 100. Obviously, they cannot exist together, especially when you look at it that way. Shakespeare wrote, "Our doubts are traitors and make us lose the good we oft might win by fearing to attempt." I'm going to also make you hang on to that one for a slightly different direction we're going to go later. But then also Charles Darwin, "As fear increases to the agony of terror, we behold, as with all violent emotions," that's interesting, "diversified results. The heart beats wildly, or may fail to act, and faintness ensue. Utter prostration soon follows, and the mental powers fail." I thought that part was really interesting. The mental powers fail. To me, that says that when we are operating from a state of fear, we are not thinking clearly, because we're in a fight or flight, or maybe freeze mode, where we're just kind of operating on knee-jerk reactions. We're operating from the instinct of fear that's telling us we need to hurry up and act now to get ourselves out of danger. So apply that to whatever you want, in whatever way you want, in any aspect of your life, in any aspect of the collective. I think it applies. In fact, another part of the book, he says, "The simultaneous brilliance and problem with our fear response is that it's lightning fast and implicit. It can't risk letting us get in our own way and spend time thinking about a reaction." So the author was willingly going through an experiment with a scientist who had run this experiment many times, where there were different colored squares or different colored shapes that were going to be flashed in front of him. And every time a blue square would come up in the beginning, he would get a shock every time. As the experiment went on, he may or may not get a shock with the blue square. But he had been shocked enough times in the beginning that his body just developed an implicit fear response to the blue square in anticipation of a possible shock. And I'll just read. It'll be easier probably if I just read it here. This is why sitting in Schiller's lab, I developed a fear response of a blue square from getting one shock and couldn't use reason, telling myself that the shock isn't actually bad, to change my sweat level from rising every time I saw a blue square. So he was hooked up to maybe electrodes or something, everything connected to him to read his body's reactions. And even if he was trying to reason with himself, even if he was working to keep his heartbeat in check, to keep his breathing in check, to keep his stress level as low as possible, there was still an uncontrollable response in his body that was created that reason and logic could not override. That makes a lot of sense to me. When you're in that panicked state, in a way, your instincts take over, and in many situations, that can be a positive thing. But in many other cases, it only serves to harm us mentally and emotionally. Here's another one. Fear often tricks us into freaking out unnecessarily, like that experiment showed, making ourselves sick as well as causing us to underperform. The mind, I'm sure you've heard a million times, but the mind really is a powerful thing, and we can make ourselves sick. That is not to say that the sickness isn't real or that it's all in your head if you do come down with an illness or develop some kind of disease or chronic disease or anything like that. But nonetheless, I believe, here we are talking the energy within, it's all about our energy. Everything really does start in our energy first. And I finally finished this book called Becoming a Medical Intuitive, I think is the proper title. And in this woman's experience as a medical intuitive, she found that everything really did start in the spiritual first, in the energy body first. So before people fully developed maybe a heart condition or shoulder pain or back pain or something like that, if they could, maybe they felt the beginnings of it, maybe they didn't, maybe there was something she spotted in their energy field, in their energy body, in their chakras that hadn't manifested anything physically yet, but this person could logically explain what was going on in their lives that would have contributed to whatever had formed in their energy body. And it was interesting to note that anything that had already showed up physically could be traced back to something that would have formed in the energy body first because of whatever had been going on emotionally, mentally, spiritually. So for many people, it was a good thing to catch what was happening in their energy body before it got to a point where it manifested physically. Because if it's not getting your attention spiritually, if it's not getting your attention mentally or emotionally, it's going to gain traction, it's going to gain weight in a sense, and then it's going to manifest physically because it's trying to get your attention. So if we're living in a state of fear for whatever reason, whether it's pandemic related or not, whether it's simply a fear of being yourself, whether it's a fear of speaking up, whether it's a fear of taking action, doing something that you really want to do because you know you're made for more, but you're afraid to take those steps. If you are operating in those moments, in those areas of your life, more from a state of fear and letting that hold you back, somehow or another, eventually it's going to build up in your energy body. And if you don't do anything about it, it's going to show up physically somehow. But so that knowledge has led me to believe that if the mind is that powerful, if the energy body is that powerful that we can, in that sense, make ourselves sick, however you want to define sick, then it makes sense that we should be able to also reverse it. You don't have to agree with me. I also believe that there are many other factors in play than just our mind and just our energy body, but I do believe it is one of the strongest factors So if it can go one way, it has to be able to go the other way. So that's the positive, hopeful side of things. But here's the thing. So if you're here listening to this podcast, if you've been listening to this podcast, if you've been following me in any sense, whether it's here, whether it's on Instagram, or you're in the Energy Within Facebook group, you've been one of my clients, you're in the new membership that I just launched, hint, hint, nudge, nudge. You know you're made for more, and there's been something holding you back. And on some level, I think we can trace a lot of these things back to some type of fear of something. And the truth is that action kills fear. Here we go back to a quote from the book. Much more often, fear is overcome through action. Sports, meditation, music, love, repetitive training, positive exposure to the object of fear, and so on. You become confident by doing the thing that you want to be confident at. It's possible to increase your level of confidence, I do believe, before taking the action, but you will not be as confident as you will be until you actually do the thing. There's nothing that can match the level of confidence that comes from just doing the freaking thing. So the other part of this, where it says fear tricks us into freaking out unnecessarily. So besides making ourselves sick, causing us to underperform. So what was that quote from Shakespeare? Our doubts are traitors and make us lose the good we oft might win by fearing to attempt. So no matter how good things appear, on the other side of this fear, on the other side of taking action, whatever's holding us back, it doesn't matter how much we want it. It doesn't matter how beneficial it will be to do the thing. The fear is strong enough to hold us back if we let it, if we don't kill it by taking the action. So this other book that I didn't go all the way back through, but I found this quote from it. This is a long title. It's called Start, Punch Fear in the Face, Escape Average, Do the Work That Matters by Jon Acuff. He talks about people going down either the average path of life or the awesome path in life. And that obviously average is easier to do, but many of us, most of us, I think if we're all honest, all of us, would prefer to be awesome, would prefer to have an awesome life, would prefer to live our best life, would prefer to be our best, highest version of ourselves all the time. So he says, so then why do most people decide to travel down the average path? The truth is they don't decide. The only thing you have to do on the average path is not die. I thought that was interesting for numerous reasons. But really, you're just existing if you're not facing your fears and taking some type of action and finding out that you're actually okay on the other side of it, that it wasn't that bad. Or if it was that bad, now you know what not to do and what you need to work on. And in fact, my older son is too dang smart, but we went to this little play area, and my sons, Teddy and JJ, were running around, and they have some stairs to climb up, and then a little tunnel to climb through. There's a slide, and then the other way on the tunnel, you can go into this car that's kind of hovering above the ground. It's up in the air, but it's secure, but it looks like it's hovering. And Teddy, my older son, kept going in there and then going down the slide. JJ's been a little more scared. And he kept saying that he wanted to go in the car. And Teddy kept telling him that he would help him. He would help him through the tunnel. He would help him get into the car. He kept telling him how fun it was. JJ would get to the top of the stairs, and then he would change his mind and say that he didn't want to do it. And all of a sudden, Teddy was giving JJ the cutest pep talk. And he said, JJ, you want to face your fear? And I never said this to him, so I don't know where he got this from. But JJ, you want to face your fear? JJ, face your fear, and then you'll see it's not that bad. So, wise words from my little guy. Face your fear, and you'll see that it's not that bad. All that being said, too, I do feel like I want to add that I believe we find whatever we're looking for. Maybe not to the extent that we can say we're looking for $1 million and then turn around and find $1 million, but I do believe that's possible too. I'm not writing it off. I just haven't been able to do that yet. But if you're looking for the positive things in life, you will find more positive things. Doesn't mean that the negative's going to go away, but it means you're more likely to find the positive things, to live a happier life. If you look for opportunities, you're more likely to find the opportunities that you're looking for. Therefore, if you're looking for the negative, you're going to find the negative. If you're looking for things to be afraid of, if you're looking for reasons not to do what you feel called to do, you're going to find them. And you're going to be able to use logic and reason to explain to yourself why it exists, why your ideas are no good. And then, let's say that being negative also doesn't push all of the positive out of your life. You're just less likely to see it. So in that case, if all you've been finding is the negative, if all you've been doing is telling yourself all the reasons why you're no good, why you're not qualified, why it's not going to work, if an opportunity suddenly presents itself, you're more likely to self-sabotage if you do take it, or you're more likely to talk yourself out of taking the opportunity because you've created that conditioned response, like that blue square with the shock, that when it pops up, logic and reason isn't there, but you're pulling from past logic and reason to tell yourself that it's not going to work because you have given yourself evidence or reason to think that it's not going to work. So here's an opportunity that you could take and use to prove yourself wrong, but instead, you've conditioned yourself that you should turn it away. So to go back to my theology teacher's quote, if you're going to live in fear, you're not going to live. You're going to be paralyzed. You're not going to move forward. And then you're going to feel stuck because you are. And then you leave yourself in that state, in that frequency where you're open to feeling more frustration, more anger, more fear, more self-doubt, maybe even self-loathing. Your confidence level stays low. So maybe my point is that unless you are in an actually dangerous situation where you really do need to get yourself out of danger, in all of these other cases where our bodies, our brains are going into this fight or flight fear response where we know logically that we're not actually in any real physical danger, that in some ways maybe fear is a choice. Maybe it's natural to have some fear in the beginning, but when it's ongoing and we don't allow ourselves to get out of that state, it becomes a choice. It becomes a comfort zone. Comfort zones don't have to be comfortable. They're just familiar, which is what makes it hard to move out of them. But what are you here for? Are you here to be average? Or are you here to be awesome? And I'm only chuckling because now I'm thinking of a Strong Bad quote. And if you don't know who Strong Bad is, go look up either Strong Bad or Homestar Runner. I don't know if the website is still up. I haven't looked, but they're at least on YouTube. And I forget what this guy who wrote Strong Bad in email said initially, but he must have been a superhero or something. And Strong Bad was responding back saying, "So, do you use your powers for good or for awesome?" I used to do a better Strong Bad voice. I hope I have a lot to cut out of this episode because I'm just looking at how long I've been freaking talking, and it doesn't feel like it's been that long. But I've been recording for almost 45 minutes. I've paused for long periods that you're not going to hear because I edit those out. So hopefully I have a lot of long periods. If you're still here listening, thank you. I hope that this has all made sense. I don't know if I tied all of this stuff together properly, if it made sense, if it inspired you. I hope that it did. But this episode has been a long time coming because it has been something that I've wanted to talk about, but oddly enough, I was afraid to talk about. That everything becomes so politicized these days. Everybody's offended by everything. And that's the last thing that I want to contribute to. I do believe I'm here in some ways to change the way people think. I don't know if I mentioned this on a podcast or not recently, but I said somewhere, maybe on the podcast, that when I was little and I would imagine myself being a famous author and being so famous and so interesting, apparently, that I was invited on talk shows. Because I also did want to be an actress, but I would imagine myself being on these talk shows as an author. And then, of course, people would ask me, well, why I want to write or why I wrote certain books. And as a young kid, the first thing that popped into my head the first time I asked myself that question was to change the way people think. And I had no idea at the time what I wanted to change, what thoughts I wanted to change. But maybe I'm here to change the frequency of fear. Maybe I'm here to change the frequency of division. Maybe I am here to bring people together in some way. Still trying to figure all that out. And there's still plenty that I am afraid of. There's still plenty that I have to work on. But this has been a long and important journey for me, and so I felt like it was an important topic to bring up. And if you know this is something that you want to work on, here are some tips. Here are some easy things you can do to lessen the amount of fear and anxiety in your life. Besides the obvious that we've already talked about, like taking action, doing the thing, doing something to shift your energy, like meditating or praying or listening to music, moving your body in some way, whether it's through exercise or dance or just moving in a way to shake it out. Turn off the news. Get off of your social media for a while. Stop looking at the accounts of people who post nothing but things to keep you in a state of fear, to keep you worried about what's coming, to make you fear people around you, to make you fear the world. It doesn't mean necessarily put yourself in a state of ignorance or pretend that there's nothing bad happening in the world. But I know I've mentioned this before. We have never been designed to exist with this constant influx of information and this constant knowing of all of the bad things that are happening in the world. Because do you think anyone's covering the good things? Yeah, maybe some people are, but how much of it are you really seeing? How much of it are you actively looking for? And I'm not trying to make a judgment here, but I know I've personally worked to notice when I've spent too much time on social media, when I've gone down too many paths, following too many people's stories, into too many posts, and I start getting upset, or I'm even maybe crying now about something, or I'm starting to worry. I'm starting to feel that sense of dread and ick in my guts. And then I look up and away from my phone and realize I'm here living my life and remind myself that the best way to have a positive impact on the world is to be present, to be myself, to live the best life I possibly can, to be that shining light, to be that example, simply by existing and doing it for other people. Not trying to force anyone to see that I'm an example or a light. I'm not telling you by any means that you must see me that way, because that's the opposite. But we choose not to live in that state of fear. I don't remember which episode number it is. I never remember to link to it when I say I'm going to, but I'll try to remember to link to it so you can find it easily. But there was an interview I did, and I'm blanking on her last name, but her first name was Mo, and she wrote a book called Be Happy First. And I interviewed her, and the whole premise is that in order to live a happy life, in order to bring the positive things to us, we have to be happy first. We have to live in that higher vibrational frequency first. None of this, I'll be happy when. None of this, I'll feel better when. You do that first. You shift your energy first, and then watch everything else fall into place. It's not to say that it's easy. It's not to say that it happens by snapping your fingers or saying, okay, I've shifted my energy, where is it? But if we want not only our own lives but the world to change for the better, some of us have to go first by raising the frequency first. So I hope that makes sense. I hope that doesn't sound preachy, but for real. Stop watching the news all the time. Stop scrolling social media incessantly. Don't believe everything you read or hear. Form your own opinions. I also personally believe it can help to withhold judgment instead of making instant opinions about every new thing that seems to happen, because it's something new every day, isn't it? Or every week. There's something new for us to be worried about. There's something new for us all to argue about. What if we just said no? What if we stopped giving in to that? What if we chose not to let that affect who we are, how we live, to affect our vibration, to change how we interact with each other? We can take action on the things that are important to us and accept that everybody cannot take action on every issue that exists in the world. So don't let it all get absorbed into your energy. So I hope that some point of this resonated with you. I hope that it was helpful. If it was, I would sincerely appreciate you helping the show to grow. And the best ways for you to do that are by leaving a 5-star rating, a positive review on the podcast app that you're listening on, if it allows reviews to be posted. I know Apple Podcasts does, and that's the one most people tend to listen to this podcast on. And also, of course, by sharing it to your social media, tagging me at I am Carrie Jokala. And if beating your fear, if beating imposter syndrome, if growing your confidence is something that you know you would like to consciously work on, I invite you into my new membership called Glow, the Confidence Club. It is a very cost-effective monthly membership where we are going to do one live group Reiki session a month, one live meditation a month that will also then be turned into an MP3 for you to download and have. And down the road, I also plan to add bonus sound healing meditations. Those may not be a monthly edition, but they'll be included and available as part of the membership anytime that I have them available. And I do want to go back to focusing on the full person, the full energy experience, where we're focusing not just on the spirit, not just on the mind, but also on your physical body. So I would like to add in some fitness classes. And those are going to be varied. Those won't be any kind of structured, we do this on this day and we do this on that day, because that just doesn't work well on my schedule. So once I have the setup going for that, it'll be once or twice a month where we might meet live. I might throw up a recording and maybe we'll do a weight workout. Maybe we'll do plyo or turbo kick, or maybe we'll just do some stretching. I just signed up for a 300-hour yoga teacher training, something I've been wanting to do for 15 years and constantly talk myself out of. But I found this and it felt right. It felt like the right time. So perhaps some yoga coming from me as well down the road. Not now, but down the road. But we can definitely do some stretching classes and flexibility classes, things like that, to contribute. Because if we're holding things in our body, it makes sense to also do some physical work to help move it, to help move that energy alongside the energy work. And it all contributes to clearing your energy of the blockages, which boosts your confidence because you feel better about yourself. You feel lighter, you feel less stressed, you feel more focused, you feel energized. So come join me inside this membership. Right now you can get in at founders pricing. I think I may leave that open as a possibility through maybe August, but that might be it. And then the prices are going to increase. So if you get in at Founders pricing right now, you lock that in for as long as you want to stay a member. So there's the base level, and then there's a VIP option. And the VIP option adds a private one-on-one Reiki session with me every month that you get to use. I should make a caveat somewhere. I do want to let you know that for sure won't be a balance forward thing. So you either use it during that month or you miss it, because it will just be too hard for me to keep track of things like that and how many extra sessions you might have. So you use it that month. So it's the best option for you if you know that you want to have dedicated individual sessions on a monthly basis. And right now, the price for that, so the membership plus that one-on-one session at Founders pricing, is less than my usual cost of just a one-on-one. So if that sounds like something that you know you would benefit from, I encourage you to get in on that now while the Founders pricing is open. If you have any questions, please reach out and let me know. You can DM me, you can email me, you can jump inside the Energy Within Facebook group and post there. Thank you for being here with me for this long. Thank you for listening to this podcast, whether you are brand new here or you've been here for a long time. Maybe you've been here from the beginning. Thank you for leaving positive ratings, and thank you for sharing this episode. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you next time.